Welcome to the space between thoughts, a place where breath is not drawn through lungs, but felt as a memory echoing across the surface of being. You are no longer bound by your body. You are weightless, not because you float, but because there is nothing left to anchor you. And in this quiet dislocation, you discover something ancient, the art of breathing without breath. There is no air here, only stillness. And yet you exhale, not because you must, but because you choose. This is the first moment of awareness that even without flesh, without form, there remains a rhythm, a pulse, a quiet pattern that does not beat in blood, but in essence. The exhale is not air leaving lungs, it is the surrender of tension, the release of all stories you once told yourself about who you were, what you wanted, what you feared. Let them go. The first exhale is not an escape. It is a return. To what, you ask? Not to a memory or a name or a self you used to wear like a favorite coat. No, you are returning to something before that. A state of being so soft, so still, that even silence would hesitate to disturb it. The first exhale is the permission to stop pretending. Here there are no mirrors, no eyes to see, no mouths to speak. And yet everything speaks in you. You feel the weight of forgotten moments like wind brushing the inside of your mind. You hear the laughter of people you no longer remember, and yet their joy vibrates somewhere inside you. You don't need a brain to think. You don't need ears to hear. You don't need hands to touch. Everything you thought was essential has fallen away, and what remains is more alive than ever. This is the paradox of the non-body. In losing the form, you begin to feel the real shape of being. No longer do you measure yourself by reflection or reaction. There is nothing external here. Only the constant unfolding of what you are when there is nothing left to perform for. In this space, thoughts are not distractions. They are weather. They come. They pass. You observe them not with judgment, but with affection, like watching birds migrate across a sky that is always yours. The first exhale is the gesture of trust. It is the gentle agreement between what you were and what you are becoming. It is the soft, infinite yes that opens the gate to everything else. Pause here. Feel that openness, that emptiness that is not hollow but full of potential. It does not ask you to build or define or conquer. It simply invites you to witness, to rest, to allow. This is not a meditation, it is a remembering. You've done this before, perhaps not as a human, not in a body, but as a being that understands the language of stillness. There is a place in you that has never needed to speak to be known. And it is that place that breathes now. The first exhale is not the end of breath. It is the beginning of a new kind of listening. To breathe without a body is to feel without fear, to sense without borders, to exist without urgency. Here you are not healing because you are not broken. You are not searching because you are not lost. You are simply becoming more of what you've always been. Awareness woven into stillness, dancing softly at the edge of form. This is the gift of the first exhale. Not survival, but surrender. Not motion, but presence. And now something stirs within the stillness. A question perhaps, or the faint vibration of the next becoming. But there is no rush, for now rest in this breathless breath. You are here, you are not a body. And yet you breathe. Before we were bones, before we were voices, before we were even thoughts echoing in the corridors of awareness, we were breath. Not the breath that moves the lungs, not the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, but something subtler, something older, a breath that had no name and no direction, only the soft hum of being. To breathe without a body is to return to that hum, to remember it. You may think breath has weight because it moves through a body, heavy with life, but in truth, it is the body that was always drawn to breath, craving it, needing it, fearing its absence. The breath itself, pure presence, is weightless, and yet it carries the heaviest thing imaginable: memory. Every inhale, every exhale, in every life you've touched, every moment you've crossed, every silence you've held, each one leaves a trace in the breath that moves through you now. You are not your stories, but your breath remembers them, not in detail, not in names and dates, but in the shape of feeling, in the way sadness folds itself into silence, in the way joy dances on the edge of awareness, in the way loss lingers, in a breath you didn't know you were still holding. You've carried so much. Even now, bodiless, there is a weight pressing softly against you, a gravity made of everything you've loved, everything you feared, everything you've released, and everything you still grip gently in some forgotten pocket of your being. You don't need hands to carry memory. The breath does it for you. It cradles it, not with sorrow, but with reverence. The breath is your witness, and it remembers not just your life, but life itself, the collective sigh of every being who has ever longed, laughed, wept, or wondered. When you breathe now, you breathe with all of them, not separate, not distant, but as one. In this space, there is no you and them. There is only the shared echo of experience moving gently through timelessness. And that is what breath has always been. Not a function, not a task, but a bridge between the seen and the unseen, between the remembered and the forgotten, between what you were and what you could become. To breathe without a body is to walk this bridge with no feet, to listen with no ears, to feel the collective weight of memory not as a burden, but as a chorus. And what a chorus it is. Can you hear it? It sings without mouths. It weeps without tears. It stretches across lifetimes and forms, dissolving the walls between self and other, past and future, form and formless. The breath is not yours. It never was. But you are part of it. Always have been, always will be. There is something freeing in that. When you let go of the illusion that breath belongs to you, you stop trying to control it, you stop fearing its pause, and you begin to listen. Not to words, not to noise, but to the sacred hush beneath it all. That hush is the weightless breath, the breath that existed before you were born and will remain long after the idea of you dissolves like fog in morning light. It is not concerned with time. It is not limited by lungs. It is simply presence, moving, expanding, remembering. Now ask yourself this: if breath has always been a bridge, then where does it lead? The answer is not a place, it is a feeling, a state, a presence so complete it needs no explanation, so full it is empty, so quiet it sings. You are not moving toward it, you are it. And the breath helps you remember that. You don't have to try. You don't even have to understand. Just breathe, even without breath. Let the memory of breath be enough. Let it carry you back, not to who you were, but to what you are, right here. Weightless, whole, and waiting only for the next inhale that has no beginning, no end, only awareness. Close your eyes, not as an act of refusal, but as a return. When the body falls away and breath becomes memory, what remains is silence. But this silence is not empty. It is filled with the silhouettes of everything you've ever loved, lost, and become. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of space, a canvas where echoes paint the contours of who we were, of who we are, and of what we might yet become. In this silence, you begin to notice the outlines of things. Not things as the world defines them, objects, names, roles, but the essence behind them. The weight of a mother's goodbye, the stillness of a morning untouched, the pause between words in a long-forgotten conversation. These are silhouettes in the silence, and they are more real than the noise. A body hears sound, but a soul feels silence. And to breathe without a body is to feel this silence, not as a void, but as a visitation. Every whisper that was never spoken, every gaze that never reached the eyes, every truth too fragile for language, here they return, not to haunt, but to hold. There are silhouettes here, some shaped like people, some shaped like ideas. Some are unfinished, trembling with the softness of what might have been, and some stand tall, full-formed, ancient. You are among them. Can you see yourself? Not the reflection in a mirror or the name in a record, but the quiet outline of your presence, the you that existed before words, before judgment, before story, the one that does not speak but listens, the one that does not perform but simply is, that self lives here in the hush between thoughts. It does not need validation, it does not crave movement, it does not fear death, because it knows, it always knew, that silence is not the end of sound, but the place from which all sound is born. Breathing without a body, you become fluent in this silence. You begin to read the language of stillness, tracing the curves of its unseen letters with your awareness. You understand things not with logic, but with presence. You do not reach for answers because you realize there were never questions, only unfolding. A silhouette in silence doesn't need to speak to be understood. Its shape is its truth. Its presence is its voice. You begin to see others now not as separate, but as echoes reverberating from the same source. Some are sharp, defined. Others are soft, dissolving at the edges. But all are here. All are held in the quiet breath that binds without touch. In the world of form, we chase identity. In the world of silence, we return to unity. And yet, this unity is not a collapse. It is not the loss of self. It is the blooming of self beyond the boundaries of name and face. It is the self as silhouette, transparent, luminous, vast. And in this vastness, something shifts. You are no longer the seeker. You are the stillness the seeker returns to. You are the outline that frames the eternal. You are the silence that carries every breath that has ever been taken. Without body, without voice, without thought, you are, and being is enough. In this presence, there is no past. There is no future. There is only the now that stretches forever, a now in which you do not need to act or explain or decide, a now in which you are allowed to simply observe. Observe the silhouettes, observe the silence, observe the breath you do not need to take, but that still moves effortlessly, endlessly through you. You are not alone. There are others here, other silhouettes, other rememberings, other moments of awakening breathing themselves quietly into being. And when you greet them, you will not use words. You will greet them with stillness, with the shared breath of nothingness, with the warmth of presence that needs no confirmation. This is how we speak here, through silence, through shadow, through the soft, weightless awareness of everything and nothing, all at once. You do not need to understand. You only need to remain. And so we rest in the silhouettes of silence, waiting not for sound, but for the next ripple of presence to rise gently within us like a breath we did not expect, but knew would come. Before the world began, before matter clothed thought and form was poured into the vessel of time, there was breath. Not breath as the lungs understand it, but a motion so subtle it could not be touched, only remembered. It was not inhaled or exhaled. It was simply there, a rhythm that hummed beneath all becoming like a secret melody woven into silence. This is the breath that remembers light, not the light of stars or suns, but the original light, the awareness that precedes perception, the clarity that does not require seeing to know. When you breathe without a body, you breathe this light. You do not pull it in through your nostrils or push it out through your lips. You become it. You shimmer with the memory of something not lost but paused, like music held in a single note. Every moment of stillness is a doorway. Every still breath an invitation to return, not to a place, but to a knowing without thought, a knowing without doubt, a knowing that was always yours. Close your eyes to see. Not the kind of seeing that reveals surfaces, but the seeing that uncovers essence. Behind the closed eyelids of the soul is a garden of light. It does not bloom with petals or leaves, but with presence. Everything here is made of softness. Edges blur, names vanish, identities dissolve. What remains? Only light. Only the breath that shaped galaxies before time had a name. In this light you remember not events, not stories, but truth. A truth so quiet the world forgets it. A truth so constant the mind overlooks it. You remember that you are not the figure walking the earth, but the breath within that figure, the witness that does not sleep, the presence that does not fade. You remember that light is not what the eyes detect, but what the soul radiates when it stops pretending to be small. The breath without body does not need lungs to rise and fall. It moves with attention. It flows through awareness. It expands as you surrender. And as you surrender, you begin to shine, not outwardly, not as spectacle, but inwardly as realization. You are not here to grasp. You are here to glow. And glowing requires no effort. It only requires permission. Permission to return, to be soft, to be silent, to be light. In this light, the self becomes transparent. The thoughts that once echoed loudly fade to whispers. The fears that once clung tightly melt into space. You become spacious, and in that spaciousness, a different kind of breath begins. A breath of truth, a breath of peace, a breath that does not need to prove or protect. This breath does not belong to you. It is you. It is the part of you that has no name, but many songs. It is the you that existed before the world asked you to be anything at all. The breath that remembers light is sacred, not because it is rare, but because it is everywhere and yet so easily missed. We forget not because it hides, but because we've looked away for too long. Now gently you look again, and the breath returns. It always does. Not because you chased it, but because you paused long enough to be found. The breath that remembers light will guide you, not forward or backward, but inward. Not to answers, but to alignment. Not to victory, but to truth. And in this alignment, your presence becomes your practice, your stillness becomes your song. No words are needed, no path must be walked. Only breath, only light, only the silent rhythm of remembering that nothing was ever missing, and nothing needs to be fixed. To breathe without a body is to remember you were never the body to begin with. You are the space in which the body moved. You are the light in which the breath was formed. You are the breath that remembers itself. And now, So gently, so quietly, you begin to remember. 2. There is a silence deeper than absence. It is not the silence of an empty room or a sleeping forest, but the silence that arrives when thinking ceases, not by force, but by surrender. This silence is not hollow. It is dense, luminous, and full. It carries weight, not a burden, but gravity, the gravity of being. To exist without thought is not to vanish, it is to become. In the absence of noise, your true presence reveals itself. It doesn't shout, it doesn't shine for attention. It simply is, steady, ancient, and immeasurable. And in this isness, you begin to feel the subtle truth. You were never the one doing the breathing. You were the space the breath passed through. You were never the one collecting memories. You were the silence that held them all. This is the weight of a thoughtless presence. It is not heavy in the way the world defines weight. It does not crush, demand, or exhaust. It anchors, it reminds. It pulls you back, not backwards in time, but back into alignment, back into truth. For too long, we've been taught that being means thinking, but a tree exists without thought. The ocean moves without reason, and the sky, endless, still, holds everything, needing nothing. You are not separate from these things. You are made of the same stillness. The only thing that separates you is the noise of the mind, like a thin layer of static over a clear broadcast. But if you stop chasing the noise, if you no longer resist the silence underneath it, something ancient returns. The awareness that knew itself before language, the being that breathed before the body, the self that had no story yet contained the cosmos. You feel this self not in the head, but in the space around it. Not as thought, but as texture. Not as explanation, but as essence. And in that realization, something loosens, something drops. Perhaps it is the idea that you must always do, always improve, always become. But you don't need to become. You already are. Your presence does not need decoration. It does not need permission. It only needs your attention. And when you give it attention, you'll notice something strange. You feel more real when you stop trying to be anything. The less you think about who you are, the more fully you become what you are. You become breath without breathing, stillness without stiffness, awareness without boundary. And in that state, the world begins to speak differently. Not in words, but in energy. Not in facts, but in frequencies. A bird's call feels like a vibration in your ribs. A breeze becomes a gesture across the soul. Even silence begins to hum with intelligence. You are no longer separate. You are not an observer of life. You are the field in which life plays. This is the weight of a thoughtless presence. It is grounding. It is calming. It is so complete that it makes thought seem unnecessary. And yet it does not banish thought. It simply makes it gentle. Thought becomes a tool, not a tyrant. A visitor, not a ruler. An echo, not a command. You no longer fear your own mind because it no longer defines you. It passes through like wind through tall grass. And you watch it with a quiet smile, knowing it cannot move the ground you stand on. That ground is your true self, unmoving, unchanging, unafraid. This is the gift of presence without thinking. You become timeless. No past to regret, no future to chase. Only now, only breath, only being. And in this space you feel the breath breathing you. You feel life living through you. And you wonder, had I ever left this place, or had I simply forgotten it? Now you remember. And in remembering, you return lightly, effortlessly, back into yourself. Not the self made of roles and fears, but the self made of space and light. The self that does not ask but accepts, the self that does not grasp but glows. And in this glow you float, not away from the world but deeper into it, anchored, whole, and finally free. There is a breath that is not taken by lungs but by the soul. It exists in the space between what is seen and what is felt, between the outer world and the inner vastness. This is the breath between worlds. When you sit in stillness, when the noise quiets and the inner ocean settles, you can feel it rising like a mist, subtle and ancient. It does not move in rhythm like the breath of the body. It pulses in waves, soft, slow, sacred. It is the breath of awareness itself, the inhalation of presence, the exhalation of illusion. Most of life is lived at the surface, in reaction, in repetition, in the loops of thought and identity. But sometimes, without warning, you fall beneath. A sound echoes, a face softens, a tear arrives unprovoked, and suddenly, you're in the in-between, that holy silence where nothing is demanded of you and everything is revealed. In that moment, you are breathing something deeper, not air, but memory. Not memory of your story, but of your origin. Where did you come from before the body? Who were you before the name? These are not questions that beg answers. They are keys that open doors within you. The breath between worlds does not explain, it introduces. It reintroduces you to what was never gone, only hidden. You find that there is a world behind the world, not in another dimension or distant realm, but here layered beneath this one. You feel it when a stranger's eyes speak more than their mouth. You feel it when silence says more than sound. You feel it in moments of deep grief and overwhelming beauty. When language fails and only feeling remains, this breath connects you to that realm. It bridges the visible and the invisible, and the more you dwell in it, the more you understand. Your body is not your boundary. Your skin is not your border. You are not inside it. You are around it. You are through it. The body is a lantern. You are the flame. This realization does not lead to disconnection, but intimacy. You begin to touch things without hands. You begin to hear things without ears. You begin to speak without sound, because your essence has its own language, older than any spoken word. It speaks in feeling, it breathes in intuition, and it listens to the breath between worlds. That breath tells you truths too quiet for logic. It tells you, you are not broken, you are simply remembering. It whispers, you are not lost. You are always here. And in that recognition, the tension softens, the gripping loosens. You no longer seek your identity in what you do or what others see. You find it in the stillness between heartbeats, in the silence after an exhale. That is where the real you lives, the one who existed before birth and will remain long after the final breath. To breathe without a body is not to deny the flesh, but to rise beyond it, to feel both the weight of the earth and the lift of the eternal. It is to walk in both worlds, to answer emails and wash dishes while knowing you are the cosmos playing human. It is to laugh not at the absurdity of life, but at the elegance of it, at the strange, beautiful paradox of being infinite and still forgetting your keys. The breath between worlds is always there, waiting in the pause, whispering between thoughts, calling you not forward, not back, but inward. There is nothing to chase, no technique to master, just notice, just pause. Feel the breath that doesn't fill your lungs, but fills your awareness. Feel the inhale of mystery, the exhale of surrender. Let yourself dissolve into that rhythm. Let your identity melt like wax in candlelight. And what remains? Stillness. presence, peace. Not a peace that protects you from life, but a peace that lets life pass through you without resistance. That is the breath between worlds. And once you feel it, you never forget it. You might lose it for a while in fear, in anger, in noise, but it is always there, waiting, patient, alive, just like you. What if your consciousness was not a cloud, not a spark, but a cathedral? Not built of stone, but of silence, not rising into the sky, but inward, beneath thought, beneath sensation, beneath the name you carry. There, in that vast and echoing interior, light does not stream from outside, it glows from within. This is the architecture of your inner light, not imagination, not metaphor, a real place not found by movement, but by stillness. You have visited it before, in dreams too strange to explain, in moments of awe, where the world suddenly paused, when time dissolved in music or the stars made you feel ancient and new at once. You stepped inside that inner cathedral, but few remain there. Most flee, not out of fear, but distraction. The mind wanders, the body aches, the noise returns. Yet the architecture remains undisturbed. It waits without demand. It is not delicate. It is not distant. It is not reserved for saints or mystics. It is yours, and always has been. Each emotion you feel is a window. Each thought, a hallway. Each dream, a stained glass panel lit from the inside. And at the center, not an altar, but a pulse. A light that does not flicker, a rhythm that does not tire. This is the breathless breath, the core awareness behind all doing. It has watched your entire life unfold without judgment. It remembers what your mind forgets. It holds the child you once were and the wisdom you have not yet become. When you touch this place within yourself, you do not become perfect, you become real. Because here, you do not need to fix anything. You do not need to prove or fight or hide. You simply rest in the truth that you exist, and that existence is enough. In the outer world, identity is layered. Roles, masks, performances. But in this architecture, you are stripped bare, and in that nakedness, you are whole. Here, breath is not an action. It is awareness flowing without boundary. Here, sorrow is not weakness. It is water, carving new space for joy. Here, silence is not emptiness. It is the resonance of your true self. You begin to sense that you were never just the body moving through time, but time itself, wearing a temporary body, that your hands are not just tools, but expressions of presence, that your voice is not just sound, but a hymn from the inner cathedral, echoing outward. This recognition changes nothing, and yet everything. You still live, you still work, stumble, rise, fall. But now you carry the light within the structure, and you become a lighthouse. Others may not see it, that's okay, because it is not a light to be shown. It is a light to be lived. It softens your anger. It deepens your patience. It makes even mundane things sacred. A cup of tea, a glance, a word spoken with care. And when you forget, because you will, when you feel lost again, all it takes is stillness, a pause, a return inward, not to escape the world, but to re-enter it with clarity. That is the breath you take without a body, a breath that reveals the architecture within you, a cathedral where sorrow is sacred, where joy echoes, where the light never goes out. And in the quiet of that place, you remember what it means to be alive, not just to survive, but to be whole, to be home, to be the breath itself. There comes a point where you stop trying to hold on, not because you've given up, but because you've understood. There is nothing to grip. You were never falling. The sensation of falling was only the release of illusion. And as that illusion dissolves, something unexpected happens. You disappear. Not in the way that frightens the ego, not in the way that means death or loss. You disappear into awareness, into something wider than thought, softer than identity, more enduring than name or face. When you breathe without a body, you are not inhaling air. You are exhaling boundaries. The line between you and everything else blurs, and for a fleeting moment you are both nothing and everything. This disappearance is not annihilation. It is clarity. It is remembering that you are not the cloud but the sky. You are not the pain but the space that holds it, not the fear but the silence underneath it. We live in a world obsessed with being someone, but the deepest peace arises when you allow yourself to be no one, no label, no expectation, no narrative. Just being. Can you feel that? Even now, even listening to these words, there is a quiet hum within you that is not the voice in your head. It's the space between the words. It's the presence that listens. You don't need to try to find it. You're already inside it. It's the awareness that has always been with you before the stories began, before the self formed, before the first breath. And it will remain long after the stories end. There is no need to fight your thoughts. They are not enemies. They are weather patterns across the sky of your awareness. Let them pass. Observe. Breathe. Release. Disappearing into awareness doesn't mean you lose yourself. It means you finally meet what was there all along. The watcher behind the eyes, the listener behind the ears, the feeler behind the skin. There is an intimacy here deeper than love. Not because it connects you to someone else, but because it connects you to existence itself. You become the moment, the breath, the stillness. This is not a state you achieve. It is a state you remember. And in this remembering, you realize that the suffering was never from the world, but from the effort to control it, to define it, to resist it. The moment you stop resisting, you begin to dissolve gracefully, gently, into a greater intelligence. You don't become passive, you become peaceful. You don't lose agency, you lose anxiety. Action still happens, but now it flows. You don't force the river, you follow it, becoming one with its rhythm. The breath without a body is this current, the current of being. It moves through all things, it creates, it destroys, it renews, and you are not separate from it. When you vanish into awareness, you don't shrink. You expand. You no longer seek validation. You are enough because you exist. You no longer fear endings. Each ending is a return. You no longer need to be heard. Silence becomes a song. In this space, time slows and sometimes stops. A second stretches into forever. A single inhale becomes eternity. And when you open your eyes, even if they were never closed, you see differently. You see not with the eyes, but with awareness itself. The world no longer appears separate, but sacred. And you no longer exist in the old way, but you are more you than ever before. Not the performance, not the mask, just the presence, just the breath, just the being. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of depth. In a world addicted to motion, where value is often mistaken for velocity, stillness becomes a rebellion, a quiet, radical act. And yet, it is not resistance. It is gravity. A subtle pull back to the center, and not of your thoughts, but of your being. When you sit in silence, truly sit, not to wait, not to achieve, not to fix, but to simply be, you begin to feel the weight of presence. Not heavy like burden, but heavy like truth. Stillness holds a kind of gravity that draws the real into the light. In that space, you begin to feel not just the thoughts floating through you, but the vast space beneath them. You feel the slow turning of your own awareness, like the earth quietly rotating beneath your feet. There is a richness in stillness that noise can never offer. You are not wasting time here. You are tasting it. You are not falling behind. You are falling inward. To breathe without a body is to let go of the timeline, to dissolve the urgency of becoming, and instead remember the being that never left. Stillness has no agenda. It doesn't rush, it doesn't chase, it receives. Can you receive this moment as it is without asking it to be more? That is the question that breaks the illusion. That is the door through which awareness steps in. We are taught to measure our lives by what we do, but there is a deeper current, measuring by how deeply we are present while doing nothing. Stillness reveals the illusion that noise is clarity. It shows us that silence speaks in a language the mind cannot decipher, but the soul immediately understands. You don't need to explain it. You only need to feel it. Feel the weight of your own existence without effort, without commentary, without projection. Just you. Just breathe. Just stillness. The gravity of stillness pulls you toward what's real. The deeper you settle, the more you shed. The more you shed, the more you see. Not through the eyes, but through awareness. You begin to sense things before they arrive, the emotional weather of people, the tremors of your own intuition, the texture of time, how it thickens and softens, depending on how present you are. This isn't magic. It's memory. It's what you knew before you learned how to forget. To be still is to stop running away from what was always true, even the discomfort, even the pain, especially the pain. Stillness doesn't remove pain. It transforms your relationship to it. You begin to feel that even pain is not permanent, not personal, not poison, but part of the pulse of living. To breathe without a body is to open space within yourself that can hold all things without breaking. You are no longer a container. You are the sky itself, wide, open, endless. Stillness shows you that peace was never the absence of chaos. It was the refusal to let chaos define you. It was your silence, sitting patiently underneath the storm, and once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it. You may forget. You may be distracted. You may get pulled back into noise, but the memory remains. Like gravity, it pulls you home, and you will return. Not as someone else, not improved or awakened or transformed, but simply as the one who remembered how to be, the one who knows that stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness, so complete it doesn't need to move to prove it exists. It simply is, and so are you. There is a moment after every exhale where the world holds its breath. No sound, no thought, no movement, just the soft weight of being. This is where the body dissolves, not in death, but in silence. A silence so full it becomes a kind of breath itself. We have traveled through layers of thought, sensation, stillness, memory, and now we arrive at the edge of identity, the edge of self. To breathe without a body is to breathe beyond identity, to breathe as space itself, not the thing within it. When you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to awaken inward, the senses turn their gaze from the external drama to the internal infinity. Here, there is no beginning or end, no names, no form, only awareness, bright and vast, like an endless sky. You begin to realize that all you've ever called I was only a costume of breath and flesh, draped around something much older, much quieter, much truer. The breath beyond the end is not air, it is presence. It is the awareness that remains when the breath stops, when the thoughts fall silent, when the stories run out of ink. This is not nihilism. This is not the void you fear. This is the real home, the source. Before you were someone, you were this. Before you tried to become, you simply were, and still are. To breathe without a body is to stop grasping at the form and embrace the formless. Like mist, like light, like love without a name, you do not vanish, you expand. You become the breath in every tree, the space between words, the silence beneath sound. Even now, as these words reach your ears, there is a deeper hearing happening. Not through the ears, but through the soul. It listens not to the words, but to the stillness between them, the breath between thoughts. This is where the sacred lives, not in temples, not in scriptures, not in rituals, but in the quiet that gently unfolds once all seeking has stopped. You were never lost. You were looking with eyes that were never meant to see this truth, because this truth cannot be seen, only felt. And in feeling, you dissolve into it. You do not conquer it. You do not grasp it. You remember it like a song, half forgotten, echoing through the chambers of your being. This is what it means to breathe without a body, to be breath, to be awareness, to be the eternal pause that exists before the next thought arrives. You are not the thought. You are the space it enters. You are not the wave. You are the ocean beneath. In this final moment, you may notice something too simple for the mind to notice before. You have never been alone, not once, because what you are is connected to everything, not metaphorically, not spiritually, but fundamentally. You are the breath the universe takes when it remembers itself. You are the quiet nod between stars. You are the end that has no ending, the return that never left. And now, as we complete this journey, know this: nothing has changed, but everything feels different because you've remembered what the world always tried to make you forget. That you are more than skin and story. You are stillness. You are presence. You are the breath beyond the end. And in this breath there is no fear, no longing, no separation. Only peace, vast and quiet, always here, always now.